He was portrayed by Leonardo DiCaprio on the big screen. He was obsessed with the glitz and the glam of society, and he became one of the great financial giants in the United States. And that man, his name is Jordan Belfort. And today's book talk or book review is going to be about one of his books. It's not going to be his autobiography. It's going to be another book. The Way of the Wolf. Straight line selling. Mastering the art of persuasion, influence, and success. Now, for all of you guys who aren't here for books or it doesn't really catch your interest, have a good one. But for the rest of you who want to stay on board, let's dive right in, shall we? I'm going to discuss a brief summary of the book. I'm going to give some of the tips or the highlights from the book. And then I'm going to give a rating at the very end of the video. First and foremost, let's start with the summary. In the beginning of the book, it gives a brief history. He talks about how he established Stratton Oakmont. He had a ragtag crew of people who knew nothing about the financial sector. But then he takes all of them, builds them up, and makes them into amazing salesmen. And they enjoy those awesome riches. He talks about traveling to different seminars to improve his financial skills or his selling skills. And he couldn't find anything until he met some certain hardships, and he developed something called the straight line selling system. Now, what is that system? The system is composed of 5 parts, and the 5 parts are the product that you have, you yourself, the company you represent, and then the other 2 factors are intangible. One is to have a person with low action threshold and high pain threshold. In other words, you want their pain threshold high. You want it high. You want it to be a great deal of pain before they purchase. If it's the opposite and it's a high action threshold and low pain threshold, then that buy is not going to happen because it's going to take crazy amounts of convincing to try to get that person to buy a product. It's probably not going to happen. So those are the 5 main components of his straight line system, and each and every single one of those needs to be a 10 out of a 10, according to him. And from the straight line selling system, he gets into things like advanced body language, tonality, scripts, building rapport. And then he wraps it up at the very end of the book with some acknowledgments and statements about ethical work. So I move on from that brief summary into more of the tips or the highlights I found to be very useful. For me, some of the useful items included the body language. Now, many of us know the whole open palms thing, shoulders back, chest up, that sort of deal. But he dropped a couple other little extra tidbits too. For example, in interactions, when it comes to a man meeting a man for the first time, whether it's a sale or another engagement, generally speaking, you don't want to come head on. Because when you come head on, many men think it's a challenge to the ego or that you're being aggressive. So what he recommends is that you come at a slight angle. Not quite 45 degrees, but just enough to sort of mitigate that aggression. And then he talks about with women and men, though, you want to approach straight on because there's no challenge, and that's perfectly fine. He even suggests in the book that women and women could experience the same thing, though the aggression's not going to be like a man to another man. So that's some of the body language tips that I found useful. But the most important thing in the book, to me at least, was about tonality. Your vocal tones. He describes 10 tones in the book. And I have 3 to 4 favorite tones. One of the tones, the first tone he mentions is the I care tone. So when you're dealing with a customer or another person, they're like, hey, how are you doing? How can I help you? Right? Some sort of enthusiasm showing that you care and you resonate with that. Another tonality that was interesting was the reasonable man tonality. So in the reasonable man tonality, Jordan Belfort says the best time to use that tonality is when you're describing facts or data. In other words, if you're trying to be objective. For example, if I'm dropping a whole bunch of numbers or I'm saying the Pacific Ocean is X amount of feet wide, I don't want to say it in an excited tone all the time. If I'm describing the benefits or the numbers to the customer, it's more like, you see, our product has been used for 10 plus years and it's increased productivity by 200%. You don't want to show excitement or you don't want to get too low because you're describing benefits. You're basically talking to that logical mind that everybody has. And then other tones that I really liked, I like the money aside tone. So that's more like when you're asking someone, you know, Frank, if money wasn't an issue and you could do anything you wanted to in the world, what would it be? Right? Just to paint a picture, to future pace anybody you're having a conversation with. And then there's the I feel your pain tone. I see. I feel it. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. That way, you establish some empathy. And that's what any normal person should do anyway. But these are all the tones, or 4 of the tones that are described in the book. And I felt like that's cool because many of us don't change our tones, or we approach and take one tone when it needs to be another tone. For example, when it comes to being serious, sometimes you shouldn't be smiley and giggly and have a high-pitched voice. And other times when someone's telling you something great that they did, your tone of voice shouldn't be like, well, good, I'm glad. You want to try to match that person's tone. That creates a better connection, greater rapport. And then when it came to the scripts, it got pretty detailed, but it was cool to see that the basis of scripting in sales or in conversations is to really get down to what the person's feeling. For example, if someone says, I'm fine, more than likely they're not just fine. That's a very passive statement. There's usually something behind it. And you have to be empathetic and ask questions to have them reveal the answer to you. To establish friendships, I'm talking about a sales book right now, but it's not just about sales. This is about the social interactions we have on a daily basis. We've got to try to cater to the tones. We've got to ask questions. We've got to be more interested in the other person than we are in ourselves, though that's a hard battle. It's one of the struggles that we all have to go through. Those are my highlights or my tips from the book that I found. As far as my rating for The Way of the Wolf, I'm very liberal and generous with all the books so far that I've reviewed. I've yet to read one that's a bad book, so it doesn't really change with this book. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10, very short, 244 pages is not too bad. Breaks it up into chapters, a lot of helpful hints and tips, and he himself, having gone to prison for, or serving 22 months of his 4-year sentence, seems to be redeemed in a sense, and playing the sales game more ethically, which I appreciated seeing that throughout the book. Overall, 9 out of 10. How do we take it from a 9 to a 10? Well, I would say more illustrations, more pictures, potentially talk outside of sales, and talk about normal interactions you have on a daily basis more frequently. He does mention a conversation where he established rapport with his son who was mad, and he had to match that too. But he doesn't talk about a whole lot of other dealings and conversations throughout life other than sales. So I would have appreciated that, and that would have taken it from that 9 to that fiery 10. So once again, for Book Talk, Book Review, that's Dante Medlock reviewing The Way of the Wolf. I thank you for watching this video. Any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to send them to me. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm trying to improve, trying to put more book reviews out there. This is what I enjoy doing. I enjoy exploring, and I hope you do too. So with that, I hope you guys all have a good one.